Well, let's go ahead and start back. So your 90th birthday today. So 90 years ago today. When were you born? When and where were you born?
I was born in Cave City, Arkansas on the 10th day of August, and my mother, to the day she died, would never give me a sense of relief on me being born on the hottest day of record in the state of Arkansas.
She wouldn't let you live it past.
Would not.
Where were you born? In a house or in the hospital?
The back
In the
room.
house.
In the back room.
Were your brothers and sisters born in the house also?
I think our whole family was born at home in the house.
So tell us about your house.
Our house with the wood stove for heat. My mother cooked on the wood stove for meals, and I can remember, I think, more of my early days without power and electricity, because I went into service when I was called in World War II, and while I was gone, they got a telephone electricity, and they was living it up when I got home.
Big difference.
Yeah.
So what did your family do for a living?
We farmed a dryland farm, which made a very meager living.
Growing what?
Well, garden is what kept us going. A good, lively garden. And my dad raised a few livestock to sell as cash money as we needed. But it was very, very meager. I haven't got a lot to be real proud of as far as what was dealt us as far as work was concerned. It was tough.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think of the family life back then. The type of family life that you guys had with your brothers and sisters and your mom and your dad, and how you guys lived and worked with each other. Do you see your brothers and sisters as friends that you hang out with, or were you trying to escape your family a lot of the time? How were you with your family?
Well,
Very close.
I'm not about to apologize the upbringing of our family. I had 3 sisters and a brother who is now deceased. There's 5 of us all total, and working was a joint effort. We all worked in the fields together, and wherever there was work, it was a family endeavor.
What were their names, your siblings?
My oldest sister is named Crystal. My second sister was Janice. My third sister was Rubelee. And I came along as Logan. And my brother was born in 1940, the last of 5 kids.
5.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
And it's Bill.
And how difficult was it for your parents to raise 5 children? Looking back, I know then you probably didn't notice, but
The only way that they knew it was tough is not everyone in the neighborhood was as
Any better off?
tough as we were having it. So they were some of means, but for the most part, everybody in our country, part of the country, was poor.
Kind of in the same boat.
Same boat.
And it was depression.
So were there some going towards like stealing and trying to live that sort of life to make ends meet? Were you ever tempted to do anything like that?
To steal?
To steal for food? To
No. Would you have the audience be quiet? They're detecting my.
It was depression years. And everybody had
Well,
a
he
hard
had-
time.
Well, he hadn't asked me about that yet.
Ask him about watermelon.
watermelon. Talk about watermelon.
Watermelon.
Stealing watermelon.
My my dad usually had anywhere from 25 to 40 acres of watermelons.
Wow.
And when I first was old enough to help cultivate, and we would load them onto a wagon with a horse-drawn wagon and go 11 miles to the courthouse square, and we'd set up there and sell watermelons out of our wagon.
How often?
Watermelons would come about July, and about 3 months.
For how many years would you do this?
We started doing it when I wasn't even old enough to have a responsible job.
Or driver's license to drive there?
Or no,
Horse-drawn.
we didn't.
Horse-drawn. No driver's license.
We didn't need no driver's license. If I might tell you something about driver's license,
Yeah.
my mom never had an opportunity to. We didn't have a vehicle, so she had no opportunity to learn to drive. Finally, my two sisters were away from home, and I was in service at the time, and Mom, being pretty strong at heart and opinionated, said that truck is not going to sit out there in our front yard. I'm going to learn to drive it. So she did. She learned to drive it, and the little county seat town, Dad said, well, I think, and she'd always drive in the back alleys. She wouldn't drive out on the front
Did she have a license?
street. No. But Dad said, well, I think you're doing well enough that we need to go up to Evening Shade, which was about 12 miles, and get your driver's license. So they did that. Mom sat in the truck. Dad went into the office of the county assessor's office, got Mom's driver's license, came back out and gave them to her, and she was a certified driver for the state of Arkansas.
She never had to go in.
She didn't have to go in. No test, nothing.
So when did you get your driver's license?
I started driving on the farm when I was about 12.
Driving what?
10 or 12 years old. It was an old Model T truck. And I'd drive it, we'd put fertilizer and seed on it and drive it out to the field. And I learned to drive, and pretty soon I drove the same roads that Mom drove in the back alley.
She
Going
told
to-
you the way.
Our nearest town, we were 2 miles away from a little one gas station town, and our little movie house. 15 cents would buy you hot dog and a drink, and we'd go to the movie. Our church, the earliest I remember going to church was a little country church, just a little one-room white church house. You've all seen them when driving up and down the road. And we went to Sunday school, church, and have a revival meeting a couple times a year. And my family's all buried there. The name of the little church was Palestine Church. About May, after when it began to warm up, the churches, there was a lot of country churches, and they'd all start having all-day singing and dinner on the ground. Everybody'd bring their dinner, kind of like potluck. It's called potluck now, but it was just everybody'd bring their own meal, and of course, all they had to come in was with the wagon and team, and they'd feed the horses, the mules. They'd feed them hay, and we'd go up the front of the wagon and eat our chicken or rabbit or whatever we might have at that time.
Not, did you buy a lot of stuff at the grocery store back then, or what?
The very, very limited amount of staples.
Like,
We raised all of our meat. We had our own cows, and for milk, and we did not have money to spend, or need we have a lot of money because we raised everything.
so you grew or made what you needed?
Yeah. Yes.
Found things,
Pardon?
scavenged, find things along or in your travels?
Yeah. We Bonnie mentioned the depression. I was hit with through my early days of farming. It taught me a lesson: never start farming for a living, because it didn't work back there. I've seen my dad, which was not a Christian man. I've seen my dad out in the yard. There'd be a cloud making, maybe a little rain. We'd get out of it, and it would pass over and rain on the neighbors. And my dad would actually scold the Lord, "Hey, you passed up some people here. Everybody needs a little rain." So the Ford family got rain and we didn't.
So when the rest of you went to church, he didn't?
No,
Never.
never.
So let's talk a little bit about your dad. So growing up, give us your first memories of him.
My dad was a World War I vet. He from Kentucky. He came to Arkansas when he was 12 years old to cut trees out of the old swampland. They were trying to drain the swampland to turn it into cultivation. And at 12 years old, my dad and his partner of that time, they'd each get in a boat, and with an old crosscut saw, no power, your own power, they'd stand in the boat and cut those trees.
From the boat?
From the boat, yeah. And all my dad knew was just level one farming and labor. There was, and so I don't know when he and my mother married after he got out of service, but my dad, just as it was three of us kids, he experienced a terrible tragedy. He was in town on a rainy day, and he was from the sheriff's office. He was deputized to go on a posse to track down the guy that had robbed a house, and so he was given the gun from the sheriff, and they was out hunting for him all day and found him. And when he got home, Dad was cleaning that gun from the rain, and he was putting it away, putting it up on the mantel board, and it slipped out of his hand. It fell and hit the hearth, discharged, and it blew his hand off, just above the wrist. And I was about 8 years old at that time, and so I knew my dad basically all the hardships that he went through trying to farm with one arm.
You said that you were 8 when that happened?
About 8. Yeah.
So do you remember a different guy before that?
Yeah, I do. I remember my dad before he lost his arm.
A little happier, I assume? A little happier, more easygoing?
Yeah, Dad suffered a terrible life after he lost his arm, because farming is a man with 2 good arms. There's no question about it. Because there's nothing. That's when you see an old plow, it's got 2 handles. And it wasn't made for a one-armed man. And so it was tough.
But he persisted. He still tried.
Yep. But I'll just have to say it over and over and over again. Our garden kept us going. We'd haul water from the nearest little spring branch and water the garden.
So each person in the family had a certain love and respect for this garden.
Oh boy, yeah.
You wouldn't let anything or anyone mess with your garden.
Nobody messed with the garden.
That was life and death. Really.
Life or death.
So your father went through World War I unscathed,
Yes.
came home, and then had this horrible accident and lost his arm.
Yeah.
Do you remember the evening?
I remember it. I remember it well.
Where were you when it happened?
The house was built pretty high off. Well, it was on the elevated land, and so one part of the house was higher than the other to maintain the level. And my 2 sisters and I was we had a little play area underneath the house. We were underneath the house, and we heard the gun go off. And I run out and up on the porch, and I can remember it as if it was an hour ago, meeting my dad, running down the hall, and he was holding his arm, and his hand and arm was hanging down like this, and so he just had a little piece of hide hanging.
Was he panicked?
No, he didn't. He fortunately, we had a doctor that lived across the street from us, and he was, I don't know what means, very, very poorly cared for, because they didn't have no country doctor at that time. All he had was some gauze and a pair of scissors. And so they put him in an old car and took him to Batesville, the nearest town, and I guess gave him some sedation.
So you didn't go with him?
No. No, I didn't.
So So, as you're growing up there, you're becoming a teenager. You're reaching puberty. Do you go to school?
Yes.
So talk about school.
My when we first started, the school was before school buses, so we walked. It was 1.5 miles from our house.
What was the first grade that you went to?
The first grade.
Yeah.
The first grade. Yeah. No kindergarten.
Okay. So took a bus to first grade, and you were in attendance throughout your childhood.
I finished high school
Great.
at
Okay.
the same school.
So how many kids were? Tell us about your school. Was it a one room? Was it?
No, it started that way. The first year or two of school was that.
How many kids in the beginning?
Well, I think they were about 1,100 kids graduated.
Oh, so it wasn't just some little.
No, it was a regional high school.
But we're talking more. So before high school, grade school. How many kids were in your grade school?
About 700.
Okay, so
No, I'm sorry, no. What the first year I went to school, it was less than 50 people, 50 kids, and the teacher taught every grade up to I think maybe 8th grade.
the same teacher taught first through eighth.
Yep,
So you got to know them pretty well.
pretty well.
How did you like your man or woman? What was their name? You remember?
Marie Bottom was my female teacher.
Miss Bottom.
Yeah.
But that was fun.
And yeah, and my man teacher was Ed Gray.
Ed Gray. And what about your friends? Did you have a lot of friends or girlfriends?
No girlfriends. And the housing was pretty. It wasn't just next door neighbor. It might be the next neighbor, but it might be several miles.
So the only time you saw them was at school.
Yeah.
So did you bother getting to know anyone?
Yeah, I did. We'd go hunting together and fishing, and so I would say my relationship with the neighbor's kids was probably some of the highlights of my growing up.
And you say girls you don't have a big memory of to speak of. Was it because you weren't interested? They weren't interested?
They was in our way.
They were in your way.
Yeah.
And so as you're getting older, tell me what type of an awareness of world politics that you had that leading up to the war that you eventually joined, but before that, leading up to it, at what point did you start to think that that might be something you would be interested in?
The activities that 20 kids in about a 15-mile radius. There was a family that they couldn't have children, and they practically adopted their surrounding kids, and he'd come by on a Saturday night with his old truck, and he made sure that everyone had their 15 cents, and we'd go to the movie. And rain or snow, we'd always manage to get to the movie on Saturday night.
And church on Sunday morning.
Yeah, church on Sunday morning.
Well, so I know you've talked to me a little bit about how you joined the military at a very early age. A lot of it has to do with Pearl Harbor. You woke up the next day and all of a sudden the world was changed.
Yeah.
Was it literally like that, or had you ever considered doing anything like that before Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I had. When the war was beginning to look like it was going to get something bad, some of the boys in school would drop out of school and volunteer for service. And I wanted to do that. And my mother just absolutely turned thumbs down. I can still remember them. If you think for a minute I'm going to sign your death certificate for you to go to some place to get killed, it's not going to happen. And that's what she thought about the fighting a war.
So at that time, the appeal to you, honestly, now looking back, was it to fight for your country, or was it to get out of school? Or maybe a little both?
Well, I did not. I didn't volunteer for service. I was drafted.
Oh, okay.
I was drafted at 18, and so I fought because my country asked me to. I didn't volunteer.
I see. For some reason, I thought you had volunteered. And so, what was the amount of time from Pearl Harbor till your 18th birthday or joining?
41. But I believe after Pearl Harbor it was about 3 or 4 years before I was drafted.
So were you paying attention, obviously, like the rest of the world, to what
Yeah,
was going
because
on?
I was wanting to volunteer all that time. My mom kept turning me down, and my friends were going off. They volunteered for service, and it didn't happen with me.
So the draft notice was a welcome sign for you. You were appreciative to be asked or to be told.
Graduated though.
Yeah, I graduated from high school, and that was in 1944, and I went in service that same year.
I guess my question was: were you happy to get the notice?
Yeah, I was excited about it because some of the boys would come home on furlough, and I had a chance to, visit, play around with them.
Yeah.
And we began to notice the girls about that time,
Okay.
too.
And they didn't mind the uniform.
They didn't mind the uniform.
Okay. Your mom didn't want you to go.
No.
You just became an adult. You realize you're going to go. What did your mom think about that? What did she have to say?
She fought a tough fight. She tried to get me deferred, that I could. Farming was considered as a strategic occupation at that time to help feed the military, and as a matter of fact, she did get me referred for 6 months to my displeasure. But it did. That's the way it worked out.
Really? How did you find out that she had done that?
The guys that I registered had basically the same registration date as me. They were called up to serve. And all I got out of it was another day on the farm. And so I began to question about, what everybody's going to fight this war but me. And all I got out of it was an old rocky farm. And so finally, Mom told me that she had applied for deferment to help farm, and it lasted for 6 months. I can tell very few stories that has a good ending, because as I mentioned early on, we were not a family of means. We didn't go hungry, and my mom absolutely did all the sewing, and anything that she could do that would cut down on the expenditure of raising a family, she did it.
Were there ever any embarrassing moments because of the way you grew up? Did you feel any shame, or was everyone literally in the same boat?
Pretty much so. It's kind of an inside joke. Maybe you city guys wouldn't understand it, but Mom would. The farmer would buy fertilizer for their farm, and it would indicate like 484, big bold letters on a sack, would indicate the contents was 4% of something, 8% of something else, and 4% of something else. So it would go as a 484. Well, you just can't believe in school when in the gym when we would change clothes to play, the sizes would indicate the type of fertilizer that you're because that's what your underwear was made out of. 484.
And everybody's was the same, so there was no shame.
It was the same.
That's great.
It's good to know they wore it.
Yeah. We're civilized.
So, when did you learn how to play pool?
I learned how to play pool when I wasn't bringing home the cabbage. Everybody could play pool but me, and I would sneak off from school to go down to the nearest pool hall, and there was a collusion there. I never did know exactly why, because I'd be in the pool hall for a short while, knowing that we lived 1.5 miles from that pool hall, and my mom would show up at that pool hall, and I wouldn't have a clue to know how she got there. And so there was somebody, Ep Green was his name. I think as soon as I showed up there, he would run to the house in his old Model T to get my mom, and she'd walk right in on me playing pool, and she would take me out of there either easy or with force.
Whatever was necessary. How old were you when you started these antics?
Well, when I started playing pool, probably 7.
Well, no wonder your mother came down.
So out of those many years of playing pool, how many trophies you got?
I mean, what?
trophies for pool?
You know, that never entered into the game until I was much older. I think the first trophy I ever won playing pool was in Tempe, Arizona.
Who was with you?
Who was with me?
Yeah.
Oh, some guys that I worked with, the neighborhood guys, and I did play some pool in the service when time would permit. But I really learned the fundamentals of the game pretty early in life.
What was that? What was that one tournament you and I went to at ASU? Do you remember?
The tournament.
That big one at ASU.
You know, I remember that. I think, but I don't remember anything about it.
I can't either, Greg.
Is this the senior Olympics?
It might have been. For some Olympics.
So would you?
I think the first year.
Oh, the Senior Olympics?
Yeah, I think that first year I was with you, you came in. You didn't place high, but the next year you won.
Yeah,
Correct?
I think so. And I don't know, I may have pawned that sometime or other.
So you started playing pool at 7, and you say you did it to bring home extra money. Would you consider yourself a hustler?
No, I just played the game pretty seriously.
So
So
okay,
yes.
I'll let that go. I'll let that go. Okay, so we didn't touch much on your siblings. Let's talk about like Christmas. You guys, would you buy each other? I know you say you had no money, so
No money.
could you buy each other gifts? Or
No.
talk to me about a Christmas in Arkansas.
Okay, to decorate a tree, there was some growth in the area of berries, red berries. So we would go out and pick those berries, and now this is not only our family, it was the thing to do in my area. We'd string those berries on a string, and then we'd pop popcorn, and we'd string that on a string, and Mom would mix some kind of a concoction, red berries and white strawberries, or white popcorn, and we'd cut out different characters in the Sears and Roebuck catalog. We'd use it for paper, and we'd make little chains. You know, I bet every girl here knows about them. And for presents, Mom would maybe try to make us something.
Popcorn balls.
Huh?
Popcorn balls.
Oh yeah. Well, she'd make us a shirt or some underwear or
But you guys didn't exchange between the siblings.
no.
No. Did you guys spend a lot of time together?
Oh yeah. I call ourselves a pretty close-knit family, although go without saying, I don't apologize for it. My dad, not all of his life, but all of my growing up days, as I remember my dad as a drunk.
Before he shot his hand off, was he a big drinker?
I don't recall him being an excessive heavy drinker before the accident.
Okay. And then, but as life went on, he did, and you were upset at that.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about living with that.
Well, my dad, a good day out would be a bottle of whiskey, and a lot of times he'd be just by himself.
At home?
No, he'd be away from home. We lived 2 miles from the nearest little town, and they'd have a lot of livestock sales, and Dad always made a livestock sale, and he always got drunk. And but he didn't he wasn't a physically abusive dad. I didn't think at that time, but he was.
Equally around all 5 of you, or did he pick on?
No, it was most of the time it was pertaining to his work. He got work to do, and nothing standing in the way of work. And my mom worked in the field, my sisters worked in the field, and so did I. Dad just learned early on, if you're going to eat, you're going to work to grow something. And the abuse, I call it the abuse more, the money that my dad would spend on alcohol and when he was drunk. That money could be used to care for the family. That part, I see it no other way to call it but abuse. But as far as physically abusing the family, I wouldn't call him an abuser.
So your mother was upset that you were going to be going away, possibly to your death. What was your father's vibe on that?
I'll let him go. He'll make it. That was my dad. He went and made it.
So he believed in you, or did he not care?
I think he believed in me.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
And then while you were away, you wrote home to them?
Yeah. My mom and I wrote, my mother wrote, I think every day I was in service.
Wow. So you had a constant flow of,
Yeah.
which was nice, I assume.
Yeah.
She the only one writing you?
Oh, I remember my sisters may have, but I'd say Mom was the main person I looked forward to.
When you wrote her letters, were you honest, or did you candy coat it for her?
I wrote her letters that I thought might give her some peace.
Whether there was any truth in it or not.
Instead of worry.
So that was your intent with the letters, was to ease her worries.
Yeah.
And so we'll touch briefly. I know we won't go into the war necessarily, but let's touch on it briefly. So you were drafted. Where did you go from there? I mean, did you get on a bus? Did your family give you a party?
did. I took my basic training in Fort Hood, Texas. It may have been called Camp Hood then, I don't know, but it was where they had that terrible shootout 70 years later. But I took my basic training there. I did good. I didn't have no problem with basic training because I was in camp with a bunch of guys from Chicago that never had high top shoes, and I just came off of a farm where I was plowing all day, and I was in good shape, and those guys would melt.
So
And
you ran circles around them.
I took advantage of it.
Were you expecting that, or was it a surprise?
No, I was a little surprised. I didn't know what to. I went in the same day as my cousin, and we separated thereafter. I was not in training with him at all, and he got out shortly after. And
He survived the war.
he
Survived the war.
yeah, he didn't go overseas.
Oh, at all?
No.
Oh, I see. So
I took my basic training in Texas. I went about as far north into Missouri as I was into Texas, taking my training. I went there in Missouri. Mom, my mother and Dad and Billy Franklin came to see me at Fort Lindenwood, Missouri, and because I'd gotten orders to check out, and
Overseas.
huh?
Or overseas.
Yeah, I went from there to New York, and I boarded a ship there.
how long did you spend? What was it like, a young boy from Arkansas showing up to New York City?
You know, they kept us in pretty close.
So you didn't
I
really know.
didn't really see much.
So where were you stationed? Where did you go when you actually went into battle?
When we boarded ship, I was on a ship that went to Europe, and I landed in southern France, right off of the Mediterranean Sea, Strasbourg, France,
What was the timing? Around what time was it? That you,
just before Christmas,
of what year?
44, I believe.
So you spent that Christmas in
Yeah.
a bunker. So talk to us about that. You arrive on on a ship. You guys go to the beach. You come out on the beach. How did you get onto land? I mean, where did you go when you got there?
They had facilities. We unloaded in the way, not a tourist, but a way that they'd unload cargo. And we didn't get wet.
Okay. And how long was it before you were in fighting?
I landed in December. I think I was 15 days on the water, and I landed in France, and we walked. I don't know how many miles it was, 4 or 5 days. And we went into Belgium, and we got right in the middle of the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans, they were dressed in white in their winter clothing. And we still had on our summer clothes, freezing. The casualties there was weather as much as it was
So is that as
combat.
cold as you've ever been?
Yeah. Yeah, our winter clothes ended up in the Bahamas, bobbing up and down on the ship that got lost. And so we went through that winter without any winter clothing.
What, without getting into too much detail, what was your role in that platoon in the military? What,
I was an infantryman,
just gun in hand?
gun in hand.
That's-
Foxhole was my saving. So you think your foxhole maybe is way too deep until the shells start coming in, and then you think, why did I not dig a little deeper? And a foxhole was, I've heard it said a lot, there's no atheist in foxholes. And I went through the Battle of the Bulge.
How long?
The Phil, I really, it was during winter time because this old guy, David, he was bombing the Battle of the Bulge the same time that I was in foxholes there. And the weather shut him down. They couldn't fly because of the weather. And the Germans actually made headway. We were getting beat up pretty bad.
Taking the weather to their advantage.
Yeah, and finally, when the weather cleared, David's bombing runs turned into a fiasco because the bombs hung up in the plane. And he just got an award a month ago after 70 years for taking care of that problem.
Which you were there for days, months, a year?
I was there from December 44 until 46.
Straight combat?
In most of it, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. I was, after the Battle of the Bulge, the next big move by the Allied forces was to line up along the Rhine River to make a final push into Germany on to Berlin. And the Allies, which consisted of British, French, United States, and they were some other fragment personnel there that I don't really know. They picked them up along the way. But our job then was to make sure that we wasn't infiltrated from the Germans coming in across the river into Allied lines. And we were there for quite a while to try to line up all the troop that was available to make a push into Berlin. And I was wounded in the final days of the Battle of the Bulge.
So we're talking about the Battle of the Bulge. You were there for, sounds like a couple of years.
Almost.
straight. So we all are familiar with the horrors of war, and I'm not going to ask you to talk about that. But what about friends? Good times? Were there any instances? You know, I had a couple days off. You got a chance to go do something. Was there anything redeemable about your experience there?
Well, you met some friends, people that you rely on to guard your back, and even though it's amazing to me, and I was part of it. It was amazing to me how fast I dropped people that I depended to save my life, to my family and to friends that I came back to.
Mm-hmm.
And some people treat that different. Our friend followed his friends wherever they were. They'd have some sort of a reunion every year, and he'd go. And I never did. I never met anybody. I did one time. We were on our way to Arkansas, and I got word that a guy lived in Texarkana, Arkansas, named Niemeyer. And Bonnie and I looked him up. Other than that, we just didn't have any contact with my Army buddies.
Was it because you didn't want to?
Yeah, it wasn't important to me.
Is it they weren't important to you, or those memories weren't something you
The
wanted?
memories wasn't important.
Okay. And so once you left that, you chopped it, left it and everyone that was involved in that behind, as a way to try to start anew.
Yep.
So tell me about that. Tell me about when did you finally get out of the military? Was the war over yet?
The war was over. I got out in July the 6th in 1946. And the war was declared over just a month or two prior to that. Where was it? May 46.
The V-Day?
Yeah.
That's what they call it, V-Day, right?
Yeah.
V-E? I don't know the date.
I think so.
But when you left the military, could you sense it was winding down, or did you have any idea?
Well, it was winding down, and we were being prepared to go to the Pacific.
Just change venues.
The Japanese were giving our guys a bad time.
So after fighting you guys that long and that hard in Europe, they were prepared to just pull you out and put you over in the Orient and
it
start
happened to a lot of guys.
Wow. So you were glad to then go home, I assume.
I was glad to go home.
And home was back to Cave City?
Yeah.
So tell me about that. Did anybody know you were coming home?
Not until I left Texas. I had a few days off. Wait a minute. That was on my way out. When we landed in Boston, Massachusetts, I called my mother and told her that I was stateside.
So tell us about that conversation.
Well, to say the least, she was thought her prayers had been answered. That even though I was severely wounded during that time. As a matter of fact, I was in the 1st General Hospital in Paris, France, when the war was over. I was wounded one time, and I got my left leg was badly shot up in my left arm.
With a gun or with shrapnel?
Shrapnel
So a bomb went off near you?
in a tree over me, and I got hit in the leg and the arm and in my helmet. If it hadn't been for the helmet, I guess it would probably blown my head off.
So did you just wake up in the hospital? Or did you have...
No, far from it. We were really being bombarded at that time with their all famous the 88 artillery, and when I got hit, my sergeant said, "Stay down, stay down." And pretty soon a medic came by and gave me a couple of shots. The medic that gave me the shots, he said, basically, is my plate is full. These shots have got to carry you through the night. And this little road that you see here, you stay on that road and you walk. And so I did. I walked all night.
With a bullet in your leg
Yeah.
and your arm.
And so it was about daylight before I saw the first vehicle. And
Ours or theirs?
huh?
The vehicle. Was ours or theirs?
It was ours. But during the night, I encountered German personnel and vehicles, German vehicles, and I felt pretty alone
I bet.
at that time.
I bet you did. Okay. So moving forward, you were in the hospital in Paris for VE Day. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So then you came to Boston after that,
Yeah.
and in the meantime, we had victory in Japan. Was it that close, or how much later was there victory in Japan?
Well, it was a few months. I can't remember when the Japanese armistice was signed, but I was in Bremerhaven, Germany, right on the North Sea, on a boat. Destination was Guatemala, some Guadalcanal, or somewhere in the Pacific. And there'd been several boats left prior to the one I was on. And we were at sea when we got word to change course.
Oh, so you were literally on your way there.
Yeah.
Oh wow, I misunderstood you then. Wow, so they did redeploy you.
Yeah.
You were about to go hit it again.
Yeah.
So tell me real quick, just finishing up with World War II, what is your thought about the bombs that we dropped? I mean, obviously they saved you yourself.
The atomic bomb
Yeah,
that Truman,
that ended the war.
I can only say it ended the war. And wars are places where people get hurt.
Yeah.
And I hesitate to judge the people that was making the decision
Yeah.
where to or where not to, and Truman will long go down as a as a man that used bad judgment, killing millions of people, but he ended the war. And history will never tell how many lives, what was in the store for Americans and allies that was going to fight in Japan.
Right. Yourself
Legit-
included.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so you're pleasantly surprised that we're turning the boat around. The war's over. We're going home.
Yep.
So tell me about the vibe on that boat.
Well, we had a lot of time. Some GIs took it differently. Stephen wouldn't know where I learned to play pool when I probably got my first experience playing pool on a ship. And but it was gratifying knowing that we were going away from war rather than into it.
And that it was over.
Yeah,
I bet.
yeah.
So carry us with you. So you come back to the land. You go back to Arkansas, I presume.
Yep.
So you tell us about you're walking back into Arkansas. You're a man of the world now. You've seen the world.
Yep.
So what do you do when you get back to Cave City?
I was, I got to Cave City. I hitchhiked from Kansas to Cave City. And I stayed in Arkansas July through the winter months. I helped my dad with watermelons. That was my chore. We bought an old truck and we peddled watermelons. I got into Arizona from Arkansas. My two buddies that survived the war, that I was in school together, we kind of made up a little deal. I had saved a couple of bucks when I was in service, and so we got together and just decided I'd buy a car and they would furnish the gas and oil, and we'd just get out of Arkansas. That was our main objective.
Destination unknown.
Yeah. Basically, one of them had relatives in Borger, Borger, I think, Borger, Texas. It was hot in oil drilling at the time. And we were going there to find work, and it wasn't no problem. If you were warm, you could find work. And he had just finished the contract, and so he didn't have nothing for us. So Wilson Dale Taylor, one of my other buddies, he had an uncle in Yuma. And we landed in Yuma, and the work choice there was pick lettuce in the fields. And I politely bowed out. I told him, I'm not interested in picking no lettuce in Arizona. I'm going to Arkansas and pick cotton. And so the three of us left California, and we had some friends in Arizona working in the mines. So that's where we ended up, in Miami, and we got work in the mines. And two of them they went on to Arkansas, and I met some guys, and I stayed on, and that's when Bonnie and I met,
Okay, slow down.
and the rest of it is history.
Okay, so you're in Miami. You had been working there now as a miner in,
Yeah.
in a mine
Yes.
with a friend, two friends?
Yeah,
A couple friends and you were in Miami for, you'd been there for how long before you met Grandma?
well, I was there on Washington's birthday, February the 22nd of 1947. And I think I met Bonnie, when's your birthday? May 13th.
Yeah.
And
No, we knew each other before that. And
anyway, I met Bonnie in an ice cream parlor
In Miami.
in Miami. And because she was in school.
I
So
still
tell me
like
about the
ice
meeting. So tell me about that day.
That day,
Yeah.
well, I was driving down the street with my old car, and Bonnie and two or three of her girlfriends came down from school at lunchtime at, was it Upton's Ice Cream?
Upton's Ice Cream Parlor.
And I saw them in there, and I seen that it was ice cream, and so I went in. And
You went in for ice cream or you went in?
no, I
We're interested in ice cream.
but our first conversation was they left the ice cream parlor, and I was kind of keeping track of them in my car.
That's what you call it.
So they were going, you were going back to school, and we stopped, and we began to talk, and it was Bonnie and Helen and Rosemary.
No, I'm not Rosemary. I don't remember the other.
Not Norton, but anyway, the other two guys left, went to Arkansas, and here I am.
And they kept saying, ice cream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream.
That was their
On
song.
and on like that.
That was their
They
song.
thought that was cute.
Yeah. And we went on to school, and I had my eyes on him, and I didn't know at the time he had his eyes on me. we figured that out later. But anyway, he was working in the mines, and he was injured, and that's your story.
Yeah, I got hurt in the mines, and the guy that came down to get me, well, where's Joni?
They're left. They've left.
No, Joni's here. Aren't you here? Her dad was working in the hospital there in Miami, and he was driving the ambulance. Jim Norton came to the mines to pick me up. Huh? You didn't know it?
No.
Yeah. And that's how I met Jim, her father, and of course he probably hadn't even met Rosemary by then. I don't know. But anyway, that's a whole nother story that brought us here.
Okay, so we were talking about meeting Grandma, buying her the Concho belt. You guys met in the department store. So what about your first date? Where'd you take her on your first date?
To a movie, and
You-
in those days, they have a newsreel. And I didn't know any of his past, you know, his wartime. And during those newsreels, he would hunker down in his chair, almost completely hidden. And I mentioned it to my mother later on, and she says, well, he's shell-shocked. And I'd never heard that word before. And that was actually it during these newsreels, because they would show wartime pictures.
Footage, yeah.
And it was, you know, his same experiences in the past.
On screen.
And it took him a long time to get over that. In fact, I think we had already had our 2 kids before I began to notice he was
Relaxing.
leaving him.
That's
So
tragic.
that was sad.
Okay, so the movie. Do you remember what the movie was? Your first movie?
Oh, no.
You?
No.
Heavens, no.
Okay.
Bill, I got a question. If I could
Must
throw
have
it in
been
there.
Roy
Yeah.
Rogers.
Yeah.
The mic.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Grandpa, I'm curious what drove you to leave Arkansas and head. I know you kind of ran out of gas on your way to California, but what made you finally want to leave Arkansas and the farm and the family to come all the way out here?
All of the above.
Hardships.
And leave Arkansas. Not leave my family. I didn't mean to say that. But I found out that Arkansas is not the only place in the country to live. And almost everybody that I soldiered with had a better upbringing than I did from Arkansas. They were from all over the country. Arkansas, at that period of time, the drought, number one, the days of the dust devils, the drought and the depression, 2 of those together just almost wiped Arkansas off of the map, really. And history will tell you that there was death, turmoil. It just was a terrible place to live.
Sounds like a wasteland.
Yeah. And my 2 friends felt the same way, that despite leaving their families, we just got back from a war, and you kind of lose some ties with your family. And so we just took off. The reason basically was to look for work.
A better life. Easier life.
So, when you left, did you have a plan? Did you know where you were going, or were you just
No.
road tripping, looking to find what you could?
One of the guys had an uncle, I believe, in Texas, and we thought we might find work there, and that didn't work, and we went on repeating what I said just a minute ago. We went to Yuma, Arizona, and he had an uncle there, and we were offered a job picking lettuce, and we turned that down. And we were on our way back to Arkansas when we landed in Miami. And because we had 2 or 3 guys that got out of the service early, and had made a stop there because they was really looking for people to work. And
Okay, we've heard this. We've gotten to Miami. Let's so just so we can get out of here. We don't want to go
I
on all
have a
night.
question.
Okay, here.
When
You want to be
you're,
heard asking it, or does it?
huh?
You want to be heard asking it?
I just want to know when you're traveling around with your buddies like that, what kind of a road trip was it? Did you stay in motels? Did you?
oh, thanks for mentioning that. One would drive and two would sleep.
So you just kept on the move the
We
whole
just kept
time?
on going. About the only something that was really exciting, and I don't think there's anybody here that would know about it. We landed in Phoenix on the day that Valley National Bank was robbed. And here we were running up and down the street, living in a car for 2 months.
In Phoenix?
Well, maybe not 2 months, but for several weeks. And we were very interesting in the eyes of the law. And they stopped us on Washington, the street, and searched us and pulled out all of our sleeping bags and our whiskey and everything, everything that they thought they might get some evidence off of, and they was really looking for robbers. And so we got out of that okay, but I think we headed out shortly after. We knew we were going through Globe, Miami, just in order to get to Arkansas.
Roads were a little different back then, too.
Yeah, really. Really, really, really.
My question is, when was the first time you had Mexican food?
In the El Rey Cafe in Miami, Arizona. Oh, the
With
same.
Mom?
No.
No, it was it was with some guys, the 3 guys that I met in Miami from Arkansas, and we went to this El Rey, and those little red chilies are round like
Cherries.
Peppercorns.
like peanuts. My friend, they were in a saucer there, and my friend got a handful of those and put them up, and they were red hot chilies. And we knew nothing about Mexican food, so that was it.
That was it.
And they're still in business.
Was it the same location?
Same location.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
The first time they ate it all right together was.
Huh?
When was the first time?
When was the first time you and Mom ate at the El Rey then? How soon after your first time at El Rey did you take Mom?
It was in the summertime.
I don't think it was too long.
Not too
The first summer after meeting Bonnie and her family, when vacation time came, I went right up here to the mountains with the family
Oh,
on vacation.
so your first time to these woods was with her family.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, there'd never be another match like her and her father. He was actually the only first time I ever had a father that would want to go fishing and do something, and Melvin wanted to go fishing, and so the vacation time, and so Bonnie, I guess, had talked to her family. I don't know, but she asked me, "Would you like to go camping with us?" And I took her up on it. And we camped on Benny Creek, John, up there by Greer. And we stayed there for a while and came back down to Sholo and went out to, what creek was that? Silver Creek. We camped right there. The family in Dixie was in the picture then, and we camped right there on that creek.
Then, so you're dating. You get engaged. How and when did you ask her to marry you? Like, where were you? Was it?
We were
Or was it just like,
driving
hey?
out of Globe toward what ice cream parlor out there.
Yeah, ice cream parlor there. We
All
go
roads
in.
lead back.
We were driving out there, and Bonnie said something. Well, I hate this place, and I said, well, you want to take a little trip? And no, and I said, well, then let's get married, huh?
Yeah. It's
So
just
that's the way it
evolved.
was.
Right there in the front seat of the car.
Yeah,
It's like, hey, I just thought of something.
let's do it.
And so, how much longer then till you actually were married? From the point that you asked,
Yeah.
A few months.
and then tell me about the wedding. Was it?
Oh God. No fair. It's something that if I could be a little bit embarrassed about what we did, it would be a wedding. This was on the 10th of December. We went to Phoenix to the courthouse to get our license. And we had made plans with her Annie D that we'd come back in Scottsdale at her house, and she would have a little party set up and have the preacher there, and that's where we'd get married. Well, we went to the courthouse and got our license, and on the way back to Scottsdale, we passed one of these little wedding chapels on Washington or Van Buren, I think it was Washington. And I said, hey, Bonnie, look, right there's a wedding chapel. What are we looking for? And so we pulled in there. She was pretty naive at that time. We just pulled in there, and this old preacher and his wife, their name was Anderson. And we went in and said, hey, we got marriage license. We'd like to get married. And he said, well, my wife will be the witness, so let's go. So we got married right there in his little office.
While your wedding party was waiting for you.
Yeah, yeah. And
How
that
inconsiderate.
was sad. That wasn't very.
So
now
you show-
looking back on it, that wasn't too good.
So talk to me about walking into the wedding party already married.
Yeah.
Well, I think Bonnie had several members of her family was there at Annie D's house, waiting on us to get back from the
But we
county.
didn't prepare that. We didn't ask for that. They planned that all on themselves.
Like a surprise?
I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
it would've
Oh,
been
okay, well-
surprising.
That absolves you guys a little bit more.
A little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah. I got something I need to tell.
Okay.
Bonnie and I, we were married, and we had found us a place to live before we got married. It was called a government project at that time. They built a bunch of cabins during the war to get miners in to the place to live,
Apartments.
so they could work in the mines.
Apartments.
Yeah, copper was considered as a strategic metal for war. And so we were living there. And her parents lived in walking distance, just a short distance up from where we lived. And Bonnie was pregnant. Mel it was on a Saturday, and it was his day off, and I came off a graveyard, and he said, Jay, let's go fishing. And I said, well, man, I'll lie, my wife is about ready to have a baby here. I can't leave. And he said, well, let me just tell you something. There's not a thing you can do here bringing that baby into the world, so other than I'd be doing everybody a favor to take you out on the creek. And oh, okay, let's go. So we went to Salt River up on the intake, and when I got home, first thing I saw was Bonnie.
My mother wasn't very happy either.
No. And Bonnie was walking the walkway from the road back to the house, and she was out like that. And she wasn't a very happy camper. So we took off to the hospital right away, I guess.
Yeah.
There, and I sit all night and held her hand. And her mother was with us. And keep going.
Yep.
And so Vicky was born at 9 o'clock on Easter Sunday morning.
9 o'clock?
Yep. And Ruth, she and I went out on, had a porch off of your room, didn't we?
Yeah.
Ruth and I went out on the porch, and both of us just hugged and cried.
It was quite a night.
Okay, so now we have 2 little girls, and we're living in Miami. All is great.
I have a question.
Your father has passed, right?
Yes, and
Okay.
What did you think? What was your first thought when they came out and said you had another baby girl?
Well, I wasn't prepared for that.
It's pretty
See,
diplomatic.
living down a little ways from Bonnie's folks, there was a little lady there, was a retired nurse, and she told me and Bonnie, she said, you're going to have a little boy. That's the way your mother's carrying this baby. It's going to be a boy. I know. I've been there too many times, giving birth, helping mothers give birth to babies, and I'm right. It's going to be a boy. And man, the guys was ribbing me out on job about, oh, you're not man enough to have a boy. And man, I was taking all bets. And so sure enough, here come Vicky out, and so I lost those bets. And when Janie came by, Mrs. Cook was her name, wasn't it? And said, "Well, I'm sorry, I missed on your daughter. I just knew she was going to be a boy, and she's a girl, and you enjoy her, and we were fine with that." Yeah, my seniority was didn't offer me much comfort or stability or assurance, and because that mine was about mined out, and I saw in the paper that Phelps Dodge was opening up a copper mine in Bisbee, the Lavender Pit. So we went down there to look it over, and they said, "Well, you're exactly what we want," because I was a trained shovel operator by then. I'd worked in the mines 3 years, and so they needed good trained people, and they said, "This is exactly what we want with you," but they didn't have a piece of equipment on the job. They said, "It's going to be a while, so let's stay in touch." And so we went back to Miami, and the following week they had a reduction in force, and I no longer was a shovel operator. I was down in the mill working, and I told Bonnie, "This is not going to get it. I'm going to call that guy in Bisbee and tell him I'm not particular. Whatever you got for me to work, I'm ready. All I'm asking you is when the equipment comes in, don't forget where I'm at. I want out of that hole."
Mm-hmm.
So that's how that worked.
So you were able to move up in that
Yeah.
in that organization.
Yeah. So we were there in Bisbee about 2.5 years, and I was a senior shovel operator. We had a new house, a company house. Had 2 girls playing in the sandboxes, and
Wonderful church.
yep, a good church. But all that company wanted out of me was work, work, work. We lived in their house, and I was the senior guy, and they just didn't take no for an answer. When they needed somebody to work over another shift, they'd come to me, and they didn't like to take no for an answer, because you're in our house. And we specifically built those houses for the purpose of people willing to work when needed. And they'd cut down on the number of hires that they needed. And so,
Also, 28 days.
yeah, 28 days without a day off. And I felt it was about to get me down health-wise. So I asked Bonnie, I went home one day and said, "How would you like to get out of here?" And she said, "Oh, when? I'm ready." And that's when I went to the guy, the chief man the next day, and told him I'd like to get my check when I come off shift. And so that's the way we left Bisbee. And in the meantime, Rosie and Jim had moved down there, and Joni was what, a year, 2 years old?
I don't know because they had gone to Flag after I was born.
Yeah.
I don't,
And you broke your leg in
in
Flagstaff.
Flagstaff, yes.
Yeah, you fell out of the high chair or something.
Okay, so you left Bisbee to go where?
We went to Oregon.
Oregon.
Yeah. We were told that I could go to work up there, operating equipment. And so we went up, we left here about April or May
Drove up there?
and drove up there.
Which part?
I bought a truck because we just had a house full of new furniture. And
Which part of Oregon?
Eugene, just south of Portland. And I think at that time, I think it was the wettest
Way back.
year on record. It rained, and it rained, and I couldn't work.
Oh,
So,
so all the work you went for wasn't there.
yeah. So in the church, there was a guy told me, asked me, did you ever work in the logging woods? And I said, no, but I can. And he said, all right. He says, I've got a lease on 1,400 acres or something like that. I'm paying stump, so much a foot on the stump. And it was logs that they used to make a 2x4 studding out of. And we worked there even in the rain
In Oregon?
in Oregon. And we stayed there all summer, and we left in September, I think, about Labor Day.
Yeah, we did.
And
And went where?
we went back to Miami.
Okay, so we're leaving Oregon, we're going back to Miami. Kids are how old?
They were, probably
5,
walking.
they were 4 and 5 probably.
Okay, so 4 and 5, you come rolling back into Miami with what on your mind? Where you're headed?
Work.
And the only reason you went to Miami is because you know Miami.
Yeah. And we figured that.
Was worked there.
Okay, so where'd you find work? What do you do in Miami?
Well, I went back to work for Inspiration Copper. The first time I worked, I was with Miami Copper. Then I went to work at Inspiration, and the same thing happened. After a couple, 3 years, I found that old Texaco station was for sale, and I bought it. And we operated the station 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that. And mine was getting ready to close down, and I saw another little ad in the paper that American Smelting and Refining was opening up a mine south of Tucson. And I went there, and same thing, I hired out with I worked there 7 years, and that's when I went to work for the union at the same time, because I helped them organize.
So we flew past the stations. How long did you own the station? One turned into two, right? Or you still own the stations at this point?
No, I sold it.
So you bought one, turned into two.
No, we didn't buy another station.
Yeah, we did.
But you
Well,
had
the
two.
first one was a Texaco, yeah,
And
14
then,
months.
and then the other one was the mobile.
Mobile station, yeah. Then they had 2 mobile stations.
So how'd you get out of how and why'd you get out of that business?
Well, the mine was closing,
Oh,
and
population was dwindling.
we could see the writing on the wall that was get the heck out of there.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Then you were saying that you went to the smelting facility.
We
there?
went American Smelting. That's the name of the company.
Okay.
They were opening up an open pit mine south of Tucson. And I went down there, and the same thing happened. When I told them I was a shovel operator, they said, "We'll hire you." And I went to work there, and I think I worked 7 years out there.
So, did you move directly into the home there off of 22nd? Or with Cole?
No, our first place we moved was on Swan and 22nd Street, in some apartment houses, American homes they called them.
Mm-hmm.
And then we bought a house under construction, and it was out off of Kolb Road. And then we sold it. We thought we had overbought bigger house than we would ever need, and we bought another house just across the street from the 22nd Street Baptist Church, and we lived there until. In the meantime, your mom was married, and Vicky got married, and you were born, and Stephen was born, and they was all hell breaking loose. Then we went to Bisbee, and as soon as there's enough, that job met the requirements that you could organize. You had to have the right number of people there. Well, I joined the union, and I became an organizer. So I was a job steward as long as I was there. And when we landed in Oregon, there was nothing going on there, union. Mm-hmm. And when we came back to Miami, I was with the union. And they hired, and then I got hired when we went back to AS&R, and so that's last 16 years of my work was with the union.
And how did you get into the area of being elected, an elected official in the union?
Well, yeah, you had to run for an office.
What made you think that you could do it, or you should do it?
Well, I was encouraged by my work achievements as a steward that potentially I would be good to represent the people that work under the union, and so they offered me a job, and I
Just union work.
took it, yeah.
And so were you championed by the workers, by the people? Were you, or
For the most part, you know who thought I was the dumb for taking that job is the Miami church, the church in Miami, Arizona. They practically disowned us. The deacons of that church thought I was a true-blooded hypocrite to join the union, working for the union, and I wasn't a Christian that time.
Yes, you were. You were a Christian in Bisbee with Dr.
Yeah.
But,
But anyway, the deacons of the Miami church really gave me a bad time.
because they're anti-union?
Oh, yeah. They didn't think you could be a union man and be a Christian.
Wow. It's very interesting. Okay, so so we're living in Tucson. The girls are married now, having children.
Yep.
So now you're a grandfather.
Yeah.
Your grandparents. So tell me about that. What's that about? How's that?
Well, we enjoyed every day of it. Having grandkids is the richest thing of our lives beside our own children. And
Some people complain becoming a grandparent makes them feel old or makes them feel different. So, were you? How were your feelings towards it? Was it like, did you have those feelings at all, or were you just all about it from the start?
I don't think we've ever felt that way.
Grandma did.
Uh,
Wait a minute. I remember something. When we told you guys that we were going to have Philip, that was your first grandbaby. Mom, how old were you?
Heavens, I don't know.
How old are you?
I think I was
44.
about 49.
No.
49.
Oh, heck no.
He's
No.
44.
Scrub.
40.
Scrub.
I was
Scrub.
39 when I was pregnant. And
What
you
was it?
couldn't believe I was going to have the audacity to make you a grandmother before you were 40.
Did that all happen?
Oh, yes. Yes. You said, I can't believe I'm only 40 years old and I'm a grandmother.
Okay. Well,
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.